All right, crutches. This is where the medicines come into play. And what can help in opiate addiction. What are crutches?
They supplement or support someone who has a bad limb, a bad leg.
So if you break a leg, you go to the doctor, and the doctor notices you've got a problem. He'll give you a crutch. Do crutches help?
Sure.
Do they cure you? No. How do they specifically work? They provide support while you heal, right? Can you use crutches wrong?
Yes.
Yeah.
How can you use them wrong? You laughed, so now you got to.
If you're uncoordinated.
Yeah. Okay. Right. You can use them incorrectly and trip. One way to do that is if you have crutches that are too big or too small for you.
Size, right.
You need the right size crutches. Okay. Can you use crutches every other day if you have a broken leg?
No.
Did you use them all the time? If you had crutches, could you punt footballs with them? Was that a good idea?
No.
Or how about letting your buddy use crutches while you have the broken leg? Would that make sense?
No.
All right. Is it a bad idea to use crutches if you have a broken leg?
No.
So let's get out of our minds forever people in the field of addiction who say that medicines like methadone and Suboxone and those types of medicines are bad because they're crutches and they're a substitute. They're definitely a substitute, but they're substitute like a wooden crutch is for a broken leg. And if it's used correctly, it's going to help you heal. And we're going to go through that in a minute. But don't blame the crutch if it's used incorrectly. When methadone and Suboxone are used correctly, they're wonderful medicines when they're used correctly. Problem is they can be used incorrectly, and a lot of people do. How do people use medicines like that incorrectly? Use them every other day. Let their buddy use them. Use the wrong amount. Same sort of thing. You got to be on the right amount of medicine. You got to take it as prescribed, and you got to take it. Don't let your buddy do it. Like I said, punting footballs with a broken leg. What if you take benzodiazepines while you're trying to take other medicines, if you're taking them illicitly in particular? That's like punting a football with a broken leg. You're going to continue to mess up the system. Crutches are wonderful when they're used well. If they're not used well, not going to heal. If I keep walking around on a broken leg, I'm going to continue with a broken leg. That's also what relapse is too, when you make some mistakes. Then you'll learn, got to use the crutches correctly. So what happens when you have a broken leg and you use the crutches correctly and your leg heals? What happens? What do you do with the crutches?
Throw them away.
When you're done with them, right? So if you use medicines correctly, and we've been doing Suboxone here for a long time, it works great when people use them correctly. If you use it correctly, it's a wonderful medicine. If it's used incorrectly, it's not the medicine's fault. Okay? Nobody blames the crutches if somebody is using them incorrectly. All right? Not the crutch's fault. So meds are perfectly useful if they're used correctly. Does this mean you have to use crutches? Do you have to use a med to get off opiates?
No.
If I asked you what basic shape do you think that the medicines like Suboxone and methadone are, what do you think the basic shape is?
Square.
It's a square, right. Guess how it works. It also fits into the receptor. It fits in the exact same receptor that endorphins fit into, that heroin fits into, that Vicodins and oxys, it fits into the same receptor. It just does so a little differently, okay? Now, if I had a car key example works as well. If I change this just a little teeny tiny bit, would it still probably work? Yeah, if I cut a couple atoms off of it, it would work still. Now, if I cut it in half, it wouldn't work. But if I change it just a little bit, it'll still fit into the ignition. I wrote down some of the chemical compositions. Now, if I asked you the chemical composition of water, you guys all know that, right? What's the chemical composition of water?
H2O.
H2O. What's the H stand for?
Hydrogen.
What's the 2 stand for?
2 parts.
Two
Parts of hydrogen.
particles of, of hydrogen. And the O?
Oxygen.
Oxygen. So I wrote down here for you a couple different opiates and a medicine in there, methadone, and, medicines if they're used correctly. And look at the chemical composition of heroin compared to methadone. What is C?
Carbon.
Carbon, H, hydrogen, N?
Nitrogen.
Nitrogen, oxygen. Okay? So you have 21 parts carbon, 23 parts hydrogen, 1 part nitrogen, 5 parts oxygen. Look at methadone. 21 parts carbon, 27 parts hydrogen, 1 part nitrogen, 4 parts oxygen. It actually has the exact same amount of particles in it. Look how extremely similar those two things are. I wrote a couple more down. There's Oxycontin. Notice carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, Vicodin. Carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen. It's extremely similar. C18, C18, H21, H21, N1, N1, O4, O3. You remove one oxygen atom from Oxycontin, now you got Vicodin. If you ever wondered how pharmaceutical companies find their medicines and how do they do that, they're just messing with chemistry. I'm sure they've tried every single possible combination, and a whole lot of rats have died in the name of science, right? But you mess with the combinations, and if it fits and it works, then they got a new medicine. That's how they do it. What is it that we need to understand? It is extremely similar. In the same sort of way that a crutch is similar to a leg, right? Sort of like the bone inside a leg, and you have a broken bone, and the wood sort of represents a non-broken bone. That's the idea. So here's the medicines, and there's the drugs. Same basic shape. Now, how do they work? When you change the chemistry a little bit, something like half-life comes into play. Who knows what half-life is? Anybody?
The amount of medication that's left in half its lifespan.
Well, very good. Okay, so half-lives can be different. Now, think of it this way. If I had a rock and a piece of bread and a piece of lettuce, and I put them all on the floor here, and I said, all right, which one's going to last the longest?
The rock.
Yeah. Why? Because its half-life is much longer. What's the half-life of a piece of bread? I mean, how long does it take for a piece of bread to start to deteriorate? And how long does it take for lettuce to deteriorate? If it came back in a year, what would I see on the floor if I had a rock, a piece of bread, and a piece of lettuce? What would I see?
A rock and mold.
Yeah, right. And the lettuce would be long gone, dust. The bread would probably be like mold, and the rock, which has a much longer half-life, would look like the exact same. Well, these medicines and these drugs have different half-lives. The half-life that it takes for heroin to burn up inside the brain is, anybody know, have a guess? How long does it take for heroin to get...
8 hours.
Yeah, well, in that time, 4 to 8 hours, that kind of thing, the amount of heroin they originally took deteriorates by half. That's what half-life means. So in that time frame. So it's like if you eat a cheeseburger, how many hours later before it's like half gone? A couple hours. 8 hours later, you're hungry again because now it's all gone. That's how it happens in the brain. So medicines work because they have different half-life. The half-life of methadone is about 24 hours. So it lasts in the receptor, like food in the stomach, it lasts in the receptor about 4 times longer than does heroin. The half-life of Suboxone, anybody know?
36 hours?
There you go. Some say it's up to 72 hours, which means once you put Suboxone inside the system, it stays in the brain much longer. Does that heal you? Remember, we're talking about crutches here. Does it heal you once you've got methadone or Suboxone inside the brain? Does it heal you?
No.
What does it do?
Stabilizes you.
Stabilizes you because it takes away that craving. If I were able to fill up all these different receptors now, if I'm taking a medicine and I fill up those different receptors, what happens to my craving state?
Go away.
Yeah, it's now subsided. Do I have to use now? No. In fact, with the craving state reduced because of the medicine, if I try to use, the medicine actually acts as a blocker. Because it's once the opioid receptor is occupied, the heroin won't fit in anymore. And by the way, drugs, medicines like Narcan, what they do is they flush out all of this stuff. So if you were to take Narcan while using a medicine or while you're on heroin, it actually goes in and it knocks clear all these receptors. That's why you go into instant withdrawal. That's what that's about. If anybody of you have ever been Narcan, not a pleasant experience, right? So this is how meds work. Half-life matters, but it doesn't heal you because it only occupies the receptor for a certain amount of time. It gives you exactly that back. It gives you time. And as you said, stability.
So it's kind of like the medication is a crutch and a cast all at the same time, in that it carries you over, like a crutch allows you to carry over the land, but it also stabilizes the bone, if you will, by stabilizing that cell receptor, and eventually reduces the amount of receptors as a result of the medication. It basically takes those receptors back into dormancy. Is that kind of here?
Well, it gives you the opportunity to do what we're going to talk about next.
Okay.
Okay, because it's just an example to get you thinking in terms of how can I heal from this. The exact way that the opioid crutches work is it gives you time back, and it does stabilize the brain because you don't have the craving state anymore. But what's the bottom line issue? Remember, you're not a drug addict. What do you want you to think of yourselves or your family members? What do you want to think of yourselves?
Sleeping endorphin disorder.
Sleeping endorphin disorder works, or hibernating endorphin, even endorphin debt. These are much more user-friendly terms anyways, because it also gets to the point. If you don't produce more endorphins, you're never going to beat this disease. You must produce endorphins. If you're $20,000 in debt and you stop spending money and you never make more money, you'll never cover that debt. We need to get these receptors filled again. Now, over time, the receptors, like a stomach, if you stop overeating, what happens to the size of the stomach?
Will shrink.
They shrink. The receptors go dormant too. They actually start to settle down, like an active volcano settling down. You demonstrate that over time. If your receptors are filled with Suboxone or methadone or medicine like that, it's going to stay active. This is why it's an issue that's very important. It gives you time back. But the cure, what you need to do is to wake up those endorphins again. And this is what we call the jump start.